My parents moved to Barcelona and left me with my sister's 10-month-old baby, then came back. Lily had just fallen asleep on my chest when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shifted carefully, trying not to wake her. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. I expected something routine, maybe a reminder about the baby formula or a link to some parenting blog she thought I should read. Instead, it was 7 words that split my world in two. We're moving to Barcelona. Emptied the account. Good luck. I didn't move. Not for a full minute. My body went numb before my brain caught up. I opened the banking app and stared at the balance on our shared family fund. $0. The same account we'd all contributed to, Mom, Dad, and me, for emergencies, shared expenses, and Chloe's recovery after her breakdown in Denver. They took every cent. Not a forwarding number. Not even a phone call. My breath caught, shallow and tight. Lily stirred, her tiny fingers curling near my collarbone. She was warm, trusting, and completely unaware that 2 people she'd never remember had just made a decision that would shape her entire life. I pressed my lips to her forehead and whispered, "Thanks for the heads up." They hadn't even waited for the weekend to end. I was supposed to watch her while Chloe rested after her supposed breakdown in Denver. No one said how long the arrangement would last, or that it came with a disappearing act and financial sabotage. But then again, nothing with them ever came labeled clearly. I laid Lily gently into the portable crib, her breathing steady, her cheeks still pink with sleep. Then I stood and walked to the kitchen where I kept the paper files, the ones Mom always mocked me for printing. I pulled out the last bank statement. It had shown over $19,000 2 weeks ago. I tried calling them, of course. Straight to voicemail. I texted Chloe, "Read," no reply. My chest ached, not from panic, but from something heavier, recognition. Of course they'd do this. Of course I was the one they'd leave holding the child, the debt, the silence. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me as I leaned against the counter and looked around. Bottles, diapers, her pink sleep sack still warm in the laundry basket. Everything that belonged to someone else, now mine by default. By morning, I'd begin sorting out Lily's schedule and look into legal guardianship. But for now, I just sat beside her and watched her sleep, the enormity of it all pressing against my ribs. Because deep down, I already knew they weren't coming back. Not for her, and not for me. The thing is, I shouldn't have been surprised. Being the reliable one starts so quietly, you don't even notice the trap forming. It's picking up Chloe from dance class because Mom has a faculty meeting, even though I had chess club. It's folding Dad's shirts because Chloe gets distracted, then watching her distraction turn into praise. I used to think I was being helpful. That being dependable made me valuable. But dependable turned into invisible. Chloe was all fire and drama, tears in parking lots, poems scribbled on napkins, a dozen half-finished majors before she settled on cultural anthropology. People adored her because she was messy and luminous and impossible to hold accountable. My parents loved her like she was rare porcelain, even when she shattered everything in sight. Me? I was the shelf. They called it the family fund, our shared safety net. Contributions from Mom's consulting work, Dad's teaching salary, my freelance graphic design gigs. It started after Chloe's second hospitalization, just in case someone else needed support. I remember that exact phrasing, someone else. Not Chloe. Not again. Someone else. But I was never someone else. I was the backup system. The first time Chloe drained the account, it was for a wellness retreat in Sedona. Transformative, she called it. The second time, it was a failed move to Portland to write a memoir she never started. They told me I shouldn't be so rigid about money, that Chloe was trying to become. Meanwhile, I patched gaps in my health insurance and drove my Honda Civic on bald tires for 6 months. Now here we were. They'd left me with her daughter, emptied the account, and moved to Barcelona like Austin was an overdue vacation. The silence after that text wasn't just cruelty, it was clarity. They'd never intended to come back. Not to help. Not to answer questions, not even to check if we were okay. I sat on the couch, the room dim around me, Lily softly cooing in her sleep. I remembered the last time my mother had visited this apartment. She'd frowned at my mismatched coffee mugs and said, "You still don't have a proper dining set." She didn't comment on the hand-painted accent wall I'd finished or the restored vintage photographs I'd hung. Just the mugs. Of course she left without saying goodbye. That's who she always was. That's who they all were. I was the quiet daughter, the stable one. Stable people don't need warnings. But Lily would. She would need more than they ever gave, and I was the only one left to figure out how to give it. By day 4, my body had learned to function in stolen fragments. Lily's sleep patterns were an impossible math problem: 3 naps of 40 minutes, or 1 long crying spell from 2 to 4 a.m. Her lungs were impressive. My nerves were sandpaper. I worked in flashes, editing website copy for a small marketing firm while she napped on a folded blanket beside my laptop. The client had emailed twice about deadlines. I lied and said the delay was due to a family emergency, which felt absurdly mild. Every bottle was a negotiation. Every diaper change a scramble. I bounced her until my arms ached, then rocked her with podcasts in my earbuds just to stay conscious. There were moments, brief ones, where she'd smile at me, gums showing, and it felt like oxygen. Then she'd scream again, and I'd feel like I was dissolving into the walls. Friends sent check-ins, texts, the occasional meme. Nobody showed up. I called Chloe twice, left 1 voicemail. I even typed out a 3rd message asking her point blank when she was coming back. I didn't send it. What was the point? On Thursday morning, after a night of pacing the floor with Lily strapped to my chest while she screamed into my shoulder, I opened the door to grab the mail and found a small container on the doorstep, still warm. A note written in careful handwriting: "You're doing more than enough." I looked across the hall. Mrs. Chen's curtains twitched slightly. She was retired, lived alone, read mystery novels with her windows open. We'd only spoken once before, about package deliveries. Later that afternoon, she knocked softly and handed me a folded baby blanket. "I made it for the wrong-sized crib," she said, voice matter-of-fact, as if this were a simple transaction. I thanked her. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't linger. It was the first time someone had seen me in days. That night, I sat in the glow of the kitchen light, holding Lily with one hand and spooning reheated soup with the other. My arms were tired, my chest heavier than hunger could explain. But for the first time all week, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, I went looking for the old filing cabinet where my parents kept important documents. I hadn't set foot in their house since the day they left. It still smelled like lemon furniture polish and overconfidence. I told myself I was just there to grab formula or maybe find an old high chair tucked in the garage. But I knew what I was really looking for: answers, or proof. Lily dozed in the baby carrier strapped to my chest as I moved through their kitchen, opening drawers with trembling fingers. The refrigerator was empty except for a jar of imported fig preserves and half a bottle of Prosecco. The cabinets were clean, sterile in the way only people who don't plan to return leave them. In the bottom drawer, beneath a pile of takeout menus and a broken wine opener, I found a worn manila folder labeled Spain. Inside were printed travel itineraries going back 6 months. Flights, apartment lease documents, Barcelona phone plans already activated. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't emotional. It was orchestrated. Behind the itineraries was a notarized form. My name, my address, my signature copied from an old lease agreement. Power of attorney for Lily Rose Martinez, age 10 months, transferred to Nora Catherine Walsh indefinitely. I pressed my thumb to the paper, trying to understand the scope of it. They had made me her legal guardian without asking, without a conversation, without even pretending I had a choice. Tucked into the back of the folder was a printed bank statement from the family account, dated 2 weeks before they vanished. A withdrawal: $22,400. Destination: Gibraltar International Bank, private offshore division. Not even a U.S. institution. They moved the money overseas. I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd once hosted department dinners, corrected my posture, and critiqued my life choices, and stared at the numbers. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to break something. But all I felt was stillness. This wasn't a mistake. It was a trade. They chose freedom, and they offered me Lily as consolation. A ceramic bowl on the counter still had the price tag from a boutique in Seattle, $180. They'd left that behind too. I folded the documents and placed them in my bag. Then I looked around the room one more time, as if expecting to find their voices echoing off the walls. But it was quiet, and the quiet didn't apologize. Back home, I opened my laptop and searched how to file for emergency guardianship in Texas. I expected the legal aid office to be sterile and overworked. In some ways, it was. The waiting area buzzed with fluorescent lights, and the receptionist barely looked up from her computer. But when David Rodriguez stepped into the room, tie slightly crooked, sleeves rolled up, he greeted me like I was a person, not a case file. That alone nearly broke me. I showed him the documents I'd found, the power of attorney, the bank statement, the printed itineraries. He read through them slowly, tapping the pages once before he spoke. "They didn't notify you?" he asked. "No. They just left." He nodded, jaw tight. "Then this isn't just a guardianship transfer. It's potential financial abandonment, maybe even fraud, depending on how the funds were classified." David explained that while the power of attorney was technically legal, the deception around it wasn't. If we could show they intended to abandon responsibility without consent, or knowingly misused shared funds, we had grounds to challenge both the custody arrangement and the money trail. I asked what the process would look like. He said it would be slow, tedious, uphill. I said I'd already been up all night for weeks. What's one more climb? That afternoon, I began cataloging everything. Receipts, screenshots, Chloe's old texts asking me to help out for the weekend, and Mom's message about the money. I compiled a spreadsheet. I printed copies and labeled them. It felt obsessive, but also like I was building something solid, one page at a time. 2 days later, Chloe finally called. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted her voice on record. "Nora," she said, her tone clipped. "You agreed to this." "No, I didn't. You said you'd be back in a few days." There was silence on the line, then a laugh, dry, condescending. "You always dramatize everything. You think they abandoned you? Grow up. They're done carrying you." I nearly dropped the phone. I steadied my voice. "They weren't carrying me. They were hiding behind me." "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "It's done. You're not going to scare us with legal threats." I didn't say anything. I let the quiet fill the space. She hung up. I labeled the recording and backed it up twice. That night, Lily had a mild fever. I held her against my chest, her breath hot and uneven, and watched the ceiling pulse with streetlight from outside. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel vindicated. But I wasn't afraid of them anymore. The next morning, I called David and told him I had something he needed to hear. The message came on a Sunday morning just as I was warming a bottle. "We're flying back. We want to see her." No apology. No explanation. Just a declaration, like they were returning to claim luggage they'd forgotten. I didn't reply. 3 days later, they showed up at my door. Mom in her expensive scarf, Dad with sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. They looked tan and rested, the kind of rested only people without responsibilities ever managed to achieve. I opened the door just wide enough to let their intentions hit the threshold, then stopped there. "You look tired," Mom said, brushing past me. "Still working that little design job?" Dad followed, arms crossed, eyes already scanning the apartment. "We were surprised you didn't reach out sooner. Thought you'd have questions. But I guess not everyone's cut out for parenting." I didn't answer. I let them talk. Mom walked over to Lily, who was seated in her high chair, gumming a piece of banana. She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Her posture's off. You really should be doing tummy time more consistently." I turned to face them fully. "I filed for full custody 3 weeks ago." They froze. "I submitted documentation of the bank transfers, the forged power of attorney, and your failure to notify me of your intent to leave the country. I also have recorded calls with Chloe confirming I never agreed to long-term guardianship." Dad's jaw shifted. "Nora, there's no need to escalate this." Mom took a step forward. "Let's not make this ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Mom's expression hardened, her eyes sharp with a kind of cold calculation I'd grown up watching. Dad sighed, performing disappointment like it was a rehearsed monologue. "I think it's best we leave," he muttered. I nodded and opened the door. Mom turned back as she walked out. "You've always had a flair for melodrama. I just didn't think you'd drag a baby into it." I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I closed the door gently, turned the lock, and exhaled. Lily dropped her banana on the floor and clapped her hands. That afternoon, David called to confirm our court date had been moved up. The courtroom smelled like dust and furniture polish, and everything felt too bright. David walked with quiet certainty, holding our binder like it was scripture. I sat beside him, hands folded, watching the judge's expression more than my parents'. Mom and Dad arrived 10 minutes late. Chloe never showed. David began with the timeline. He presented the notarized documents, the travel plans dated months in advance, the account statements showing funds drained and transferred offshore. Then he played the recordings, Chloe's voice, dismissive and cold, confirming I had never agreed to guardianship. He handed the judge a printed transcript. Mom cleared her throat several times. Dad smirked occasionally. They didn't deny the evidence. They tried to reframe it. My daughter is prone to exaggeration, Mom said smoothly. She's under tremendous stress. Caring for a child, especially one that isn't hers, is bound to bring up emotions. The judge didn't blink. I've reviewed the documentation, she said, her voice level. What concerns me is not just the abandonment, but the calculated nature of the transfer. Miss Walsh was misled and left without support, both financially and emotionally. She paused, looked directly at my parents. I'm granting full legal custody to Miss Walsh. The offshore account will be frozen pending investigation. Any visitation from the biological grandparents must be supervised and approved in advance. Mom opened her mouth. The judge raised her hand. We're done here. Outside, the wind had picked up. Mom stopped me by the courthouse steps. You were always jealous of Chloe, she said, voice low and sharp. Even as a child, you just waited for a way to punish us for loving her more. I looked at her but said nothing. She turned, heels clicking, Dad following behind without a word. I walked to the parking lot where Lily was waiting with Mrs. Chen, who'd come without being asked. The baby giggled when she saw me, arms outstretched. That night, as I rocked her to sleep, I realized I hadn't felt relief, just an odd, hollow stillness, like the end of a very long echo. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a message from David marked urgent. The kill hums quietly now, steady and warm. I keep it running most mornings while Lily plays on the quilted mat a few feet away. The rocking chair I bought from a garage sale sits near the shelf of finished pottery. She naps there sometimes, fingers curled around a fabric elephant Mrs. Chen stitched by hand. My hands are back in clay. The wheel spins again. I open my home studio 2 days a week, 3 when Lily is feeling settled. Orders are slow but steady. The local coffee shop restocked their mug display with my pieces last month, and a college student wants a custom set for her senior project. I take what I can, and I let the rest go. Mrs. Chen comes by every Friday with homemade dumplings wrapped in foil. She never stays long, just long enough to check in and give my arm a soft squeeze before she disappears down the sidewalk. Her presence is its own kind of healing, quiet, dependable, the opposite of what I was raised to expect from adults. Sometimes I still wake up expecting a new message, some fresh twist in the saga. But it's been months, and the silence has settled into something I can live with. The legal follow-ups are mostly done. The account is still frozen. There's no word from Chloe. I've stopped waiting. Last week, Lily took her first steps between the work table and the door. She fell after the third one, then laughed like it was a game. I laughed too, then cried alone in the kitchen after she went to sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was the one who saw it. I wrote Chloe a letter yesterday, not out of obligation, just to close a loop. I didn't say much. Lily is safe, I wrote. That's all that matters. I didn't include a return address. This morning, as I opened the studio and set my fingers into the damp clay, I looked at the small rocking chair beside me, the tiny bowl Lily had dented with her thumbprint, the faint streaks of flour on the floor from yesterday's toddler baking attempt. I was left behind so they could escape. But I stayed, and I built something better.